Hi, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Problemista, which was one of my most anticipated movies of 2023, but then it got delayed and it's finally out, although it's coming out in a slow rollout. So when this episode goes up, I'm not sure if it'll still be in theaters or if it'll be on streaming, but I'm happy to finally have seen it, loved it, and to get to talk about it. And joining me is Shadan Larki. First time on the show. We had a great time talking about this one, getting into some great puzzle pieces, some of both of our all-time favorite movies, honestly. So that's how you know that it's going to be a good one. So that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And with that said, let's get to the episode. All right, we are going to talk about Problemista. This is going to be a fun one to get into. With me, I've got Shadan Larki. Shadan, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to podcast with you for a really long time, so I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy we finally made it work, and on such a wild movie and weird movie and a fun one. I had a really good time with this movie. It just goes in so many interesting directions. I'm looking forward to getting into it, but it is your first time on the show. Why don't you tell my listeners a little about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I would say I'm a film journalist. I'm not as criticky as a lot of my fellow film critics, but I do a lot of writing for awards daily and around the web, kind of interviewing a lot of actors, directors, but also behind the scenes people. I love getting to talk to like production designers, costume designers, figuring out how it all comes together. And I do a lot of award season coverage. I host an award season podcast with InSession Film, so I love awardsy movies. I love weird little quirky movies. So this is right up my alley of things that I like. So
Yeah. I was looking forward to this one all last year, and then it got delayed because of the strikes. And now it's coming out, and like at the time we're recording this, it's still in a kind of like strange limited rollout where I'm not quite sure how it's connecting with people because this is a weird little quirky movie. Julio Torres, I'm not really familiar with his SNL stuff or Los Spookies. I haven't seen that. I do know it's produced by Emma Stone, which maybe will give it a little bit of a boost as it starts rolling out, after this past Oscars. But was this one that was big on your radar at all before it came out, or was it just like, oh, what is this?
So I actually saw it at South by Southwest last year.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't on my radar when I went to South by. It was just one of the big marquee titles that they had last year. And I'm glad you say that, David, about not being familiar with Julio, because I wasn't as well. And I after the screening, I knew a lot of people said that, oh, this is exactly what his humor is like, which has made me so intrigued to kind of check out the rest of his stuff. And it's interesting you mentioned Emma Stone because she and her husband, Dave McNary, were at the screening. And like have been very public in their support of the film, and like he's been doing interviews with Emma, and I mean Tilda was there. So like I think just having sort of this A-list talent, I'm hoping is going to be part of the draw and maybe encourage people to see it. But all of this to say, and it got such an amazing reaction out of the festival last year. So I'm glad that it's like finally out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. This feels like a word of mouth movie anyway. It feels like the kind of thing that everybody is going to like kind of tell people like, you really got to see this movie. It's just like not really like anything you've quite seen, which is going to be interesting for getting into puzzle pieces, but we should get to some puzzle pieces here, trying to figure out what might have inspired this. What do you have for your first puzzle piece?
Oh my God, you're making me go first. Okay.
You got to
I'm going to say my first puzzle piece is like Charlie Kaufman. So something like adaptation, which sort of deals with like making art and like the quest for creativity, I guess, and sort of that like offbeat Kaufman-esque, weird but brilliant and sort of meditative vibe.
Sure. Absolutely. There is so much creativity here, so much meta-ness to what being a creative person trying to just survive, is like. And I think a lot of his work, I mean, anyone who listens to the show knows I love him and love adaptation, especially. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that here, and in a lot of Kaufman's other work. I actually just heard you over on Ben Miller's Target Audience podcast talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
My
Um,
favorite movie of all time. Happy
it's a
20th birthday to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yes, we are recording this on the 20th birthday. It is just an absolute masterpiece. I will just jump right into my first puzzle piece, which is another Michel Gondry film, The Science of Sleep, which I think goes right along with. I mean, obviously, Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman worked together multiple times, so their sensibilities are together. But this one is, I think, as far as I'm concerned, the best of Michel Gondry's outside of Charlie Kaufman work. It stars Gael Garcia Bernal as a kind of underachiever, kind of weirdo, honestly, kind of guy who wants to work in calendars, but he's not really quite sure what he wants to do, and he's just trying to exist and trying to make it in this world, and just all that anxiety creating this surreal existence for him to try to get through all of the roadblocks that come with finding a job, making friends, fitting in the world. And while that movie set in Europe doesn't have the American parts of what the roadblocks are for our character Alejandro here in Problemista, I do feel like there's a lot of kind of kindred spirit energy between that character and the character that Julio Torres is playing here, and that they both just can't get past just the ridiculousness of everything, and the way that manifests as so much surreal craziness really fits in with the Michel Gondry kind of ideal and the way that he makes movies, and goes right back to your first puzzle piece as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. That sounds great. I'm like, I need to watch that as soon as we get off this podcast.
I think you'll like it, especially as a fan of Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, and that fits so well.
It's so playful, It's weirder, I would say, but it's so playful, and it has his whole point of view all over it. So definitely a recommendation there. What do you have for your next puzzle piece?
My next puzzle piece is Stranger Than Fiction, the Will Ferrell movie. I would say because Problemista has sort of the narrator aspect to it, that sort of really reminded me of Stranger Than Fiction, sort of this narrator that's providing meta commentary on this guy's life. And in Stranger Than Fiction, he's sort of struggling with what does it mean to work and be the slog and the machine, right? Versus your own creativity. So I think that really fits with Problemista. Sort of, he wants to be this toy maker, and he's such a creative spirit, but he also needs to sort of survive, and he has to end up working for Tilda to get his work visa to be able to chase his dreams. I think Stranger Than Fiction sort of fits with that sort of meta commentary on work and what it means to be part of the American clog in the machine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great one. I hadn't thought about that, but just somebody who just wants to get along, basically, and just try to exist, really. I mean, that's the main thing with Problemista, as weird and surreal as it all gets. This is just somebody who just wants to exist and just have a nice little life, and there are just so many blocks to that, and especially for somebody who's an immigrant and has to deal with those extra layers of everything that this character Alejandro has to go through. So I like Stranger Than Fiction. It's a good one. I haven't seen it since the theater, but yeah, I remember liking that movie when it came out. I'm glad you brought that one in here. I will go actually do a TV show for my next puzzle piece. I wanted to throw this one in here. It's the South Park season 15 episode, You're Getting Old. I don't know if you ever watched this or remember this, but in this episode, Stan starts becoming deeply cynical about the world as he gets older, and literally everything starts manifesting as actual shit. Turds walking around the street, and everything is just shit. And it's obviously he's depressed, and for a good reason. And it's a very nihilistic episode of just how bad everything seems as you start getting older, and you start just seeing all the little flaws and the breaks in the system, and just how difficult and it all just feels rigged. And that whole journey that Stan goes on really reminded me a lot of Alejandro, and seeing every little step being just this huge rigmarole of like impossible steps and impossible things to get around, and everything is just so stupid. And like it just kind of is, and then when we get into some of the more like sci-fi elements of this movie, because in this movie, Tilda Swinton's husband, played by the RZA, which is amazing, but he has frozen himself to be
Mhm.
thawed out in the future, but they never actually thought of a way to do that, to thaw people out. And so he ends up in this distant future, and everything is stupid in the future too. Nothing has gotten any easier or more, agreeable in how you would expect it to be. It's just all just kind of dumb, and it just totally reminded me of the way South Park looked at just that growing up and just the stupidity of everything around you. And I love that about this movie.
That's such a good comp because I really wanted to find something that would kind of fit with the sci-fi of it all, and I've never really seen anything do sci-fi the way that Problemista does sci-fi.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I couldn't find a good fit there. So that's such a clever idea.
right on, right on. Well, what do you got next?
Okay, so my next one is kind of a reach, but there was something about Problemista that felt a little bit Wes Anderson to me, and like the use of the vivid color really reminded me
Hmm.
of Wes Anderson. So I would say Wes Anderson in general. And there's like this shot where Alejandro is like he's like going upstairs or something, and we sort of see like the outline of his, you know what I'm talking about? Where he's like and it's like representative of the steps that he has to go through for immigration, but he's just going up like flights and flights of stairs. So I'll say
Yeah,
like I'll say Moonrise Kingdom, maybe, just in this idea of like looking at these kids that are trying to, be creative and free spirited while also dealing with like growing up and sort of these like outside forces that are maybe a bit constricting of that
yeah.
creativity. Um, but yeah, I love sort of, yeah, like how colorful Problemista is, and I think that indie sort of quirkiness again kind of goes back to Wes Anderson a little bit for me.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Moonrise Kingdom is a great example of that. I think even his most recent movie, Asteroid City, which obviously was out at the same time as this was supposed to come
Yeah.
out, but still, dealing with the artist's journey and everything that goes into being an artist and the difficulty of that. So I think that would be a good example too. But yeah, you get a lot of that creative energy and the quirkiness, and it's obviously a lot of really great use of color, which goes back to Michel Gondry as well, honestly. But there's a lot of that in there, so I think that's a great one to include here for sure. Um, I will go next to this being an A24 film. I'm gonna go with Everything Everywhere All at Once for another puzzle piece, for another kind of immigrant story that tells a very fantastical, unique, and weird way of dealing with some of the issues that really everybody deals with, but also there's a lot of aspects of it that deal with immigrant families. But, um, throwing all this extra oddball, surrealist layer on that, and that, of course, in Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's a multiverse situation. Here in Problemista, it's just a weirdness to it all. It's not necessarily anything like that. Like we said, there's some sci-fi to it, but really it's just surrealist and strange. And it just adds an extra little quirk to, what these people have to go through to try to just fit in and survive.
Oh, I'm so jealous I didn't steal that one. That's so clever. You're totally right. Because that's another thing is I wanted to find like something that represented the immigrant journey the way that Problemista does, and sort of like they're different, but I think sort of talking about like how do you maintain your dream and sort of your own humanity in a system that sort of like, I don't know, makes you lose that, or makes you just feel like
Sure.
you're sort of losing yourself, or you're just fighting so hard to survive that it's hard to hold on to your individuality because so much of your focus is like, how do I get through the day type
Yeah.
situation. So that's such a smart, man, you're very good at this. No wonder you've been hosting this.
360 something episodes. Yeah, it's been a while,
Mhm.
but yeah, I thank you, and I would also add in there, you know, just how much grinding there is. There's so much work, but and of course that probably speaks to the immigrant experience a lot as well. But like, these people all have multiple jobs, multiple gigs. Alejandro has to just go into the gig economy, and of course there is a personification of Craigslist throwing out possible jobs at him, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But and did we mention Isabella Rossellini as the narrator? I know you
Well, I was
brought up
gonna
the
say, yeah, I was gonna
narrator.
say the narrator, yeah, Isabella, which is such a just brilliant choice, and she adds so much to the point where like I wanted a little bit more of her in there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, the rest of the cast, I mean, Julio is great, but just everyone else that's like Tilda, Isabella, and then just like his like friends that he had. I mean, the whole cast is great. But yeah, she's such a phenomenal narrator. There's so much warmth there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do love Tilda though. She is so insane in this. I didn't really have I've got a couple more puzzle pieces, but I didn't really have like a specific piece for her, which was difficult. She's just this how do you even put it? Just like this maniac kind of gatekeeper that he
Mm-hmm.
has no choice but to work for her, but she's just awful. And I'm sure there's a character that could probably be tied to.
I mean, I thought a little bit about The Devil Wears Prada, sort of
Oh, that's a
like
good one.
you have
Yeah.
this dream, but to get there, you have to deal with this like eccentric, crazy boss that has wild
Yeah.
demands and sort of the Miranda Priestley, Meryl Streep of it all. But yeah, I mean, Tilda, she really, and this is something that I admire her so much as an actress for, is like she just goes for it. Like it reminds me of Trainwreck with Amy Schumer. Like she just goes so balls to the wall in that movie, and like nobody would have expected her to do that as brilliantly, or even this like tiny little A24 film. Like she just like
Yeah.
goes for it and is so weird, and but it's also like for some crazy, as weird and crazy as she is, like I feel like there has to be somebody in the art scene in New York that's exactly similar to that, where she's like freaking
Oh
out
yeah.
over like the walnuts in her salad or something. um so like even in her eccentricity, it still feels really grounded, and I guess
Yeah.
that's the power of Tilda Swinton.
I could go for an hour talking about some of the weirdos I've had to work with as a musician here in Las Vegas. Like it is like they are out there for sure. I just want to say my favorite part of this whole movie, and it's just a small character detail, but Tilda Swinton's phone light is on through the entire movie. And then at the end, she just nonchalantly notices it and turns it off. But like that is something I do too. Maybe I'm the crazy person, but I walk around my house with my phone light on all the time. And I when I noticed that she was doing that, it just made me just die laughing. It's so
I
ridiculous.
mean, one of the things that just really played like gangbusters for me was like Alejandro's walk. Like he has this really specific way that he walks, and it's
Yeah.
so great. And I would love Julio Torres to just tell me why. Like why was that the walk that he chose for the character? And I kind of love, I think, the fact that like Alejandro and the Tilda Swinton character, they kind of present like two different sides of being wildly artistic. Like one,
Mm,
you can, maybe it's like when you start out you're very grounded, but then maybe when you do reach the height of money and all this kind of stuff, you do lean into the more crazy stuff. I don't know, I think it's really interesting meta commentary on like what happens when you become successful, or like when you feel like you have to put on an aura or a character. um
yeah. I love that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this one again and trying to like dig deeper into that because yeah, I agree. There's got to be more to that there. But I'll go to another piece. I'm going to go with another TV show. Actually, I'm going to go with 30 Rock for my next puzzle piece because we're talking about the surrealistness of all this, and it's just weird stuff happening from beginning to end. And there's a story here. There's plenty of plot involved with this character, trying to get a job so he can get his work visa, so he can stay in New York City and stay pursuing his dream of making weird toys or whatever it is, toys with realistic problems, I think it is. But
mhm.
but along the way though, it's just nonstop strangeness. I already mentioned the RZA is Tilda Swinton's husband. He paints these eggs that are supposed to be these like grand pieces of art. The whole FileMaker Pro situation, the strange cutaways to just all of Tilda Swinton's nonsense. there's a lot of that joke a minute slapsticky 30 Rock vibe to this. And so I just wanted to throw that one in here as well. I also really love that moment when there's a lady in really high heels that is interested in buying the egg paintings. And she just goes about like looking at them and considering buying them. And you notice her heels are really high. But it's just not really played for anything. And then as she goes to leave, she trips, and it's like just a perfect like non sequitur joke, like a 30 Rock bit.
That's great. I love that. Can I also tell you one thing that I really appreciated about Problemista? I think a lot of times we see like immigrants and children of immigrants, like you feel this pressure to maybe do something that's like quote unquote more practical than toy making,
Mm,
right? Or like you have to do something where you can make sure that you're making money to sort of offset all
yeah,
the struggles that you've gone through. And I love that like he kind of always sticks to like, no, this is what I want to do. And even like the when we hear from his mom, like she's super supportive and like it's I don't know, I just thought that was so beautiful and like subtle, but just a really important message of like you can do the crazy weird thing that you want to do, which kind of takes me to my next puzzle piece, which is crazy out there. And let me say this is courtesy of my friend Amy, whose couch I'm currently sleeping on.
right
But
on.
she said that the premise of the movie reminded her of Ratatouille because it's crazy that a
Ooh.
rat wants to be a chef and he needs the help of this dorky weird dude to make it happen, but he sticks with it and accomplishes his dream. So I'm going Ratatouille. And I think that makes total sense because why would you want to be a toy maker and why would you want to be a rat that can cook? But you got to just stick with your dreams. So
Yeah, that great one. Surprisingly, I've never seen Ratatouille.
you've never seen
I've never
seen
seen
it?
Ratatouille. I need to see it. Obviously, it
Oh,
ties back into Everything Everywhere All at Once, but
yeah. Okay,
so
you need to watch it and then we can do a sequel podcast for
hell
Ratatouille.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think we could do a whole episode on movies that Ratatouille probably inspired. I bet that would fit really well. But yeah, no, great one. I'm interested in watching that. But I obviously know the story of Ratatouille and how that would fit in, and I think that's a great one to include here. So yeah, great piece. I will go for my last one. And this one's, because like we said, this movie did premiere last year, but I was also thinking of a movie that came out last year, Flamin' Hot, which we got all those like weird true stories of successful brands last year. And
Yeah.
this one about Richard Montañez, the janitor who came up with Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And again, all of these just nonsensical and unfair ropes he has to climb and loops he has to go around, and the whole cyclical nature of the way that this country is built up and the things that people have to deal with in order to just work and do a job. And so I was really thinking about that. And also in both movies, other characters kind of push our main character to eventually become more outspoken and assertive and stand up for themselves. And that's part of Alejandro's journey in Problemista, and it's part of the journey in Flaming Hot as well.
Yeah, and both directorial debuts and like I feel like have
Yeah,
a very specific vision of what they want to accomplish. That's a good one.
right on,
I
right
think
on.
Ratatouille was last on my list. I don't know. I feel like I should just leave it at Ratatouille. Go out with a bang.
Go out with a bang, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Ratatouille? I'm sure I'll love it when I watch it. But we will go down our list of puzzle pieces here, and we'll get into some closing thoughts. We talked about adaptation, the science of sleep, Stranger Than Fiction, the South Park You're Getting Old episode, Wes Anderson movies, including Moonrise Kingdom and maybe Asteroid City, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Devil Wears Prada, 30 Rock, Ratatouille, and Flamin' Hot. And I think there's like between the surrealist aspects, between just the kind of look at just how difficult everything is, how just shitty it can be at times. I think that's kind of the main thing here. But I don't know. Is there any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't quite get into while going through puzzle pieces you wanted to bring up about Problemista?
I was just kind of wanted to talk about the ending and sort of um how you felt about that. And I think what's interesting for me, and I had a really interesting journey with Problemista because because I wasn't familiar with Julio Torres and sort of his style, like at first I was like, okay, where's this going? I didn't really understand what path it was on, and then I kind of understood what he was going for as I was watching it. And then at the end, I felt very conflicted about it because it felt like many directorial debuts, he was going for a lot of different things, and maybe there were some things that didn't stick the landing as much and other things that
Mhm.
worked really well. But given that it's been a year that I've seen it, I feel like now I feel so overwhelmingly positive about it. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a really interesting point of like sitting with it and the fact that it's like grown so much. And I think it might be that way for a lot of the audience that watches it too. Like maybe at first you're like, "That's really weird," but the more you think about it, the more you dig into it, and I think these puzzle pieces is such an interesting discussion, like, that's gonna help, but I just love when a movie does that. I love when it
Yeah.
kinda gives you more to chew on after, because there's so many movies I can think of that I watched it and enjoyed it and never thought about again, but Problem is to
Yeah.
just it has stayed with me a lot. Yeah, so I guess, like, what did you think of it as, like, a directorial debut and sort of his vision? Like, where do you stand on all of that?
I think it's like a very assured like directorial debut. I mean, obviously, invoking people like Michel Gondry, and the Daniels, people who really, have vision and just go for it, really kind of shows that this guy has something special to go for. As for the ending, and I don't know for sure if I'm landing on, if there even is a right interpretation of any of that,
Mm.
because obviously it's very surreal and strange. But to me, it was kind of like, and I keep talking about the stupidity of everything in this, society that we're seeing in the movie, which is, basically our society. But I was kind of thinking that it was showing that the stupidity of everything is kind of an equalizer, kind of, that Tilda Swinton's character ended up in the same place that Alejandro did, that the RZA did, everybody did. They all just end up in this, surreal, weird future. They all go through their versions of their experiences, but end up basically in the same place by the end. And I think that that's a interesting ending, if that's the way it is. But I also think it's kind of powerful in its own weird little way, and that everybody ends up in the same place basically, regardless of the journey.
I kind of had a similar read on it. Yeah, that they sort of all ended up in the same place, and even sort of like Tilda with her outlandish ego, she's sort of in the same place as like her former assistant, right? And it kind of
Sure,
is this idea that like death is the great equalizer, but in this case,
sure.
it's this cryogenic craziness. No, I definitely agree. And I think sort of speaking of puzzle pieces, it'd be really interesting to see what kind of impact Problemista has, because I could see if you're watching this and then maybe thinking like, I want to tell my story in this really weird way, and we're getting into this really interesting thing. It's interesting that you brought up Flaming Hot, like this idea of we can tell stories, but it doesn't have to be like the traditional linear biopic, I was born, whatever, all this kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see if more filmmakers will take this route of like, and having A24. This is such a like quintessential A24 movie to me, and
Yeah.
so I would love to see them lean into this kind of stuff even more.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when this trailer came out last year, and like I said, this was on my most anticipated movies of last year list. When it came out, this trailer gave me the feeling I used to get with A24 movies, like back when The Lighthouse and Midsommar and like
Mhm.
Uncut Gems, and like where I would see that trailer and be like, okay, this is the movie of the year for me. I cannot wait to see this. And as much as, I loved Problemista, but like, I don't know if it necessarily lived up to that. We'll see with subsequent viewings, but, it was so much more exciting, that trailer, than a lot of A24 trailers lately. And yeah, this is like quintessential, like what you're looking for when you hear the A24 brand is involved in it in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, I just think it's interesting that you mentioned that about this being that kind of movie.
Yeah, I worry that A24 is starting to lean more towards like tentpole titles or whatever, and I just
Mm,
I want to see them do more stuff like this. And again, Emma Stone, I love the fact that she's using her star power to like champion something that's like small and unique and weird. And
sure.
I hope that this industry leans into that more. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to kind of revisit this down the line and see maybe this was like a stepping stone towards something, because I think it could be. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too, and I certainly hope so. But I think that does it for Problemista. Shadan, is there another movie you watched recently? I know you just watched a whole lot of stuff at South by Southwest, but anything you want to recommend to our listeners?
Anything that I want to recommend, I would say look at, speaking of South by titles, I would say look out for Dev Patel's Monkey Man that's coming out in
Ooh,
April.
can't wait.
Really another, speaking of like directorial debuts, just really strong, colorful, visceral, steeped in Indian mythology, clearly like very close to Dev Patel. And I love this idea that you can have an action piece that has a lot of meat to it, and like the violence feels earned to me, and it's not just violent for the sake of violence. I loved The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. I hope that that's going to be a big one and the kind of thing that gets butts into seats in theaters.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm excited for those two, and I'm excited for hopefully things that people show up for, because I want people to support these kinds of weird tent poles, but tent poles that are creative and unique and are doing more than just like the Marvel machine, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. And I can't wait for both of those movies. But Shadan, tell people where they can find you and your writing and everything you're up to.
Yeah, I am at Shadan Larki on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, and Awards Daily, InSession Film, all over the place. But again, thank you so much. This was so fun, and hopefully we can reconnect in the future and dig into more crazy puzzle pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while trying to get you on, but I'm happy to finally do it,
Yeah.
and definitely we'll get you back again sometime. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Problemista. Thank you to all of you for listening, and thank you to Shadan for joining me on that one. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure that you are subscribed. There are so many episodes on the way, and you don't want to miss them as they come out. You can subscribe wherever you're listening right now, and maybe while you're at it, drop a 5-star rating and review. That would be very helpful. Make sure more people check out the show and more people get involved. And speaking of getting involved, if you thought of any puzzle pieces for Problemista that we didn't bring up, please send them my way. I will read them on the next trailers episode. You can either contact me on social media at PiecingPod. There's a contact form on the website, piecingpod.com. You could comment directly on the episode if you're listening on Good Pods. And otherwise, there's plenty of other ways to find me. I'm sure you'll find me. We also have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content for piecing it together, awesome movie year, and my music career. There's also exclusive video versions of some episodes of this podcast. Lots of great stuff over there. I appreciate you being out there listening, but if you want to support the show in that way, that is also very much appreciated. You can do that at patreon.com/by David Rosen. Lots of great stuff to check out over there. And speaking of my music career, I'm currently in the middle of my 24 for 2024 series, where I'm releasing a new single on the first and third Friday of every month of this year. That's 24 new songs I'm releasing. And to go along with this episode, Problemista, I think I have a good one. This is a track that's going to be coming out later in the year as part of the 24 for 2024 series. It's called Attention Span. It's a weird one, and I'm actually working on a stop-motion animated music video for it with a visual artist, and we're making something that's going to be super cool and super weird, and I can't wait to share it when it comes out. It should, hopefully, if all goes well, be out later this year, right around the time that the song drops, which I believe is November, but I don't know. I'd have to check the schedule on that. But anyway, the song's called Attention Span. It's part of the 24 for 2024 series. I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back with more piecing it together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.